Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode here on the Matt LaStalia Show. Today I got something cool, another run through. We did this, something similar to this, I think 2, maybe 3 weeks ago, where I broke down a series of stories, and kind of weave them together in a way that was meaningful. And that was a really fun episode. I hope that you guys enjoyed it, because I really enjoyed it, and that's exactly what we're going to do today. So, whether you like that one or not, if you didn't like that one, drive on with your bad self. If you did, I think that you'll really appreciate this one. But today, I had this idea of taking the road more traveled, right? There's this played out cliche-ism of the expression of, take the road less traveled and march to the beat of your own drum. And that's great. Like, listen, I don't get it twisted. I think it's important. I think it's something that I try and do to a certain extent, but I think what we end up doing with this idea is that we actually forget, one, how frequently we travel on the roads more traveled, and how truly important it is that we do so. And so when did this come to me? This came to me, this idea, this thought process came to me in a very literal form, where I was going for a walk with Yasmin and the midget who, we have to call this, it's Ariana, Yasmin's daughter. So we have to continue to call her a midget for as long as possible, because she's actually quite tall for her age. And she will very, very soon be outpacing Yasmin when it comes to height, which isn't necessarily a tall feat to overcome. Bringing in the dad jokes, a little pun there if you didn't catch it. But yeah, so soon she's gonna be taller than Yaz, and that is going to be hilarious. And we will not, but the not hilarious part will be that we cannot call her a midget anymore. So we will enjoy it while we can. So the three of us, plus our 2 pups, our Newfoundland puppies, 4 months and 3 months old now, Moose and Harper. This was actually, I guess this would have ended up being Harper's second adventure out into the woods. I took her out, kind of a solo mission, me, Harper, and Moose, just to see how she would operate. I work from home, and so the dogs are most familiar with me. They get the most hours in with me, and there's just less moving pieces, and so I wanted to take them out, and so I took them out, and we went for a walk, and it was great. And we have this typical route that we take, right? We'll head out in the backyard, we'll go down to the creek, we'll kind of handrail that creek on over to the river. Once we get there, we kind of, play around a little bit. We get them into the water and let them kind of splash around. They're supposed to be water dogs, really, really great swimmers, and so we try to afford them the opportunity to swim, to get used to the water, to see what it's like. And so that's fun. It's a fun thing that we get to do. And so that's kind of like a turning point. So we hang a right, go up the river a bit, cut back up into the woods, and then there actually breaks into this from kind of a natural northern-ish Virginia landscape, like wooden landscape, to most likely like a man created portion of the forest, because it's all pines. It's like, and the spacing of it seems like kind of too well established, too symmetrical. And I might be dead wrong, but from the look of it just feels like it's so weird and random, and just bop, this like plop of pines. Then it makes me think that it was like planted there, and they're all like exactly the same age, exactly the same, circumference, or thereabouts close to. So that's really neither here nor there. But so we get to that point, and it's actually a really cool part. Usually right there is Several times we've seen this owl flying around, and so that's really cool. So we make our way through there, and it's a little bit more opened up, a little bit easier to navigate, and that leads us directly to this large open area where we go and play around with the pups, and it's this Boy Scout actually area, and so we go over there and we run around, we play with them and everything, and so. We do that, and that's after we go there. Then we kind of cut back to that same creek where we started, because this is kind of like the loop around. And we're back at that creek where we started. And what we typically do is we'll cross the creek and we'll go over and kind of meander our way back behind the houses until we get to ours, and then we get up to ours, and it's all good to go. But the issue is there. It's been really rainy, and that end part post Boy Scout area is really muddy and like kind of overgrown in a way, and there's not really a lot of established paths there. And so it was interesting because on the day when Yasmin and Adi came with the next day, which was probably the same day as this podcast last week, it was like Friday, probably Friday. So the when we went out, we did the whole normal thing, right? We went out, went to the creek, handrailed it down to the river, took it up, went through the pines, went to the Boy Scout area, played, went down. And it's when you leave that area, you go down and it drops pretty steep and dramatically. And so like basically from that point, like when we're leaving the Boy Scouts area, the whole thing is just kind of like pushing through the brush, like there's not a lot of predetermined paths, and you're just kind of pushing your way until you get to the point where you get to like the area that leads up to the back of our home, and then that's pretty cleared out. But it was interesting because this time, for some reason, I don't know how I missed this, like on all of like the 70 times that I've done this walk until now, but taking a right, basically hanging a hard right at the creek instead of passing it and trying to go. If you hang a hard right before the creek, there's like this beautiful, forest highway that's just like cleared out and perfect for our family and the pups just to cruise right along down until we get to the point where we cross the creek and go up to the house, and it's all beautiful. And we were like 5 steps. I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh. Yes. Okay. Yeah. We're going this way this time. And like 5 steps into it, I was like, oh my gosh, it's so nice to take the path more traveled, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. It's such a valid and very real concept that, like I said, when I really sat down and thought about it, I was like, I feel like we take the paths that are smoothed out, that are well established and well traveled, and have the wildlife cleared out, and then the grass cleared out, and then we put some gravel down, and then we put some pavement down, right? And we have this really smooth, easy, travelable route. I think we take that for granted, and it's just like we're always like looking to like branch off of that and like trailblaze, go somewhere new, go somewhere unknown, and do all these great and amazing things, and there's this natural drive in us to do that, and it's very real. That drive is very, very real, and it's important because that drive has actually led to a lot of amazing things. So basically, everything that you see around you today is a result of that. The fact this communication right now is a result of that. People willing to blaze new trails, essentially, and all the way back to the beginning of mankind, right? And so, but what we fail to realize is 2 things: the fate of or the result, or the outcome for the thousands and thousands and millions probably at this point of people that went to blaze some trails and burned out. And when I mean burned out, I don't mean, oh, they failed and they had to start over. I mean like dead. And I don't mean dead in like a nice, cute, easygoing, quick way, like horrible, awful, painful deaths. and that's some of them, right? That's most of them. Most of the people that go trailblazing, that's a lot of failures. And then for the people that do actually blaze that trail, the ones whose names are in the books, you also don't hear about what happened to them either. like it's this magical, mythical story where you're like, oh yeah, this dude went out and he went on this expedition and they found this thing and it was amazing and our world is better for it. And that's where the story stops. You don't get the result, like what happened to Homeboy post expedition in his life. On that expedition, on the way back from the expedition, a year later, like we're missing a lot of these key details that are fairly they're not significant. It's just, I think it's really important to know. It's important to know what comes with this territory of trailblazing, right? And so I wanted to share some stories. I went looking and I found some interesting stories that I wanted to share with you guys of those, and most of these are going to be people that you very much recognize from very basic early on history classes. If you recall back, I'm sure that the names will ring a bell. So the first thing that I wanted to dive into was the story of the folks who came over, the pilgrims, the people who came over on the Mayflower to the United States, right? To the United States, to the New World at that time. And so how does this story play in, right? So interestingly, there was like 102 people-ish that went on this voyage that left the mainland. And I'm not even going to go into like the real deep history of how when they it's not like they left Britain or France and like hopped on a ship and went to America. They actually left. They had no initial interest in going to the New World. That what they really wanted was they wanted religious freedom. They wanted to not be persecuted for their religion, and they found out that Holland was actually a really good place to do that. And in Holland, they actually stayed there. I think they stayed there for something like 2.5 years. I just said that I wasn't going to get into this, but I nerd out on history, and so that happens. So they ended up staying there for like 2.5 years, and they saw that their children ended up being like kind of indoctrinated into like the Dutch and Hollandese ways, and so they were like, "Nah, man, we got to get out of Dodge." And so they picked up, took off, went to the New World, all because they cared so much about the way that their children were being raised and the principles and the culture that their children were being imbued with, that they wanted to secure that in a way that they were more in control, and they knew that they could form that up in the New World. And so they took off, went across the ocean, went and the beautiful thing is 102 of them took off, right? And on the way there, only one died. Only one croaked, and it was actually a guy who was a crew member, and he was the one that was like poking fun and like verbally harassing a lot of the passengers. It's like, "Oh, you're getting seasick, you're weak, blah blah blah," this kind of stuff, just really demeaning. And everyone in the crew kind of felt like he was smited down by God, because he was the only one that died. There was a dude that fell over the side of the ship and held on to one of the lines and was able to get pulled back in and lived. So this doesn't really sound like it fits in with the criteria that we let in with, right? So like, all these people, they go across, they take this great expedition, they get to the New World, and only one dies, and he seems like he's kind of an a-hole anyway. So that's all cool up until like the first winter, right? So this is pretty common knowledge, but it just fits the criteria. I feel like it's an easy one to lead in with. So first winter comes, what happens? So like 45, almost half of the people die in the first winter. All right, so this is the fate of those trailblazers. Half of you die. In the effort to mold the culture for your family and everything, you die. Half of you die. And it's just, we give thanks and we have Thanksgiving for all the stuff that happened, with the Native Americans, and it was great and it was cool, and they went through a lot of hardships, but the hardships led with 50% of the people dying. And so that's part of the trailblazing path. So when you're blazing that trail, keep in mind, just cold, harsh winters, and half of you are going to die. And that was considered a success. That's how crazy trailblazing can be. So, but thinking and speaking of America, and let's dive into that name, America. So America, right? I'd be very curious. I actually really love this story this idea and this part, of history, because it's American history, and it's always really kind of it's always interested me. I actually have a book up here called Ratification. For those that are on the podcast, I'm pulling a book off the shelf called Ratification: The People Debate the Constitution 1787 to 1788. And that is the story of all the different states going through the debates over the Constitution. So it's so funny, because getting a little bit off topic, but this is a meism. People think about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, really more so the Constitution, because the Bill of Rights, we'll hold off on the Bill of Rights for a second. They think about the Constitution as if this amazing document that was created, that everyone kind of fawned over, and we found it, we discovered this thing, and there was this widespread consensus. Like, if you're not well read into history, and you don't have to be well read into history, because I'm not well read in history. I don't know almost anything about history. I just find books about subjects that interest me, and I read those, and that only gives me the piece of the picture from the perspective of the dude who wrote, or chick that wrote that book. But off of that book, which is extensive, it's like 500 pages or so just on that, the every nuanced debate, every freaking piece of evidence or historical documentation that brings to life those events, and it kind of tells it in somewhat of a story fashion, like taking on the different characters for each kind of debate, and how some of them have carry over from state to state debate, and how alliances shifting and changing, played roles as things unfolded. But it wasn't this consensus thing. It was actually highly fraught with disagreement and debate, and it almost didn't happen. It's eventually, when it came close to time for it to happening, the walls broke, and then everything kind of poured through, and it was like, okay, yeah, no, it's really happening. But there was a lot of concern and a lot of maneuvering that kind of had to happen, and some people had to change sides, and there was politicking and recruiting and stuff. It was for me, it's really interesting, because I look at it like I talked about on the show before. I look at politics a lot like I look at sports. I see it's entertaining, and it's interesting, and it just has the potential to have more impact in our lives than sports do. Unless you're at a World Cup and you get killed because of madness. But anyway, all of that aside, America, it's a very specific name, right? It's not Columbus, and it's like, well, shouldn't it have been? If the first dude that found the country or found the land was Christopher Columbus, the first European anyway. We can get into all the little fights about Vikings and blah 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 blah. In the exploration age, in the discovery age of that time, when Europe started traveling and exploring west, and explorers started finding the New World, Columbus was the first one of those to find land. I think he landed on Barbados, but he found what are now the Americas, the continents, right? And so, why wouldn't they be named after Christopher Columbus? So this is actually interesting in two regards, because you could look at it as Christopher Columbus's expeditions, and all of what he did. He didn't get named after the countries didn't get named after him, and even more interestingly, the countries didn't get named after. Sorry, I'm losing focus on myself in the camera. The country wasn't named after the Queen of Spain, whoever the person that Columbus rode for, the person that Columbus sailed for and was paid for and everything, like, it didn't get named after her. And it's because we didn't become a Spanish country, and that's a whole lot more history. But and that honestly probably has a bit to do with this. But the interesting thing is, there was a guy who the continent did get named after, and his name was Amerigo Vespucci. And the thing is, I knew about Amerigo Vespucci. I'd be very curious to learn, like, if there was, like, polling data somewhere, like, how many people actually knew about or know about Amerigo Vespucci, and how he actually came, how his name actually got placed onto the continents. The cool thing here today on this show is that you get to find out. So if you don't know already, and you haven't already Googled it, and if you do, it's not even that straightforward. Like, you kind of have to, like, read the story, like, and it's not like he did this and it got named after him. It's actually, there's a story there. So in 1490, in October 12th, right? October 12th, 1492, that's when Columbus landed in Barbados. That's the day that we said, that's the day that we recognize it, Columbus Day, this, that, and the other. I don't have the date, I don't know the date offhand, but Vespucci sailed for, did he sail for Spain? I forget. I thought that I had this written down somewhere. He had made 3 voyages, right? So, he had made 3 voyages to the New World, and the first one was in 1500, like was it 1501? 1501. So he was sailed really far south. Like, he was on the southern tip of South America in 1501. And this was the interesting thing. This is like, okay, cool. Columbus did that like 9 years earlier. So almost a decade went by when you think about it. Like, for me, it's really easy to lose perspective on history because we hear the dates. You're like, oh, that's really close together. Like 1492, 1501. Right? That's almost a decade. Think about your life. Think about what was happening a decade ago. Like, that feels like, for me, I'm 33. So when I was 23, I just joined the Army, made it through basic, made it through AIT, and was like starting to come into my own in the unit, but like still like a bumbling private figuring out my life. Like, married to my first wife, probably pregnant with our second kid, and with another one to come later, and a divorce to come later, and a remarriage. Like, a lot happens in a decade. So while these dates like seem close together and in the span of when we look back from like 2021, God, I'm like forgetting what freaking year it is. It's kind of world we're in. You think about 2021, and you like flash back, in your head the best of your ability to the late 1400s and early 1500s. Like, 10 years seems very small, in that perspective, it is small, but it's a long time. So how could Columbus go and discover America, and then another dude goes and doesn't discover America, and he gets named after it? And here's the more... Actually, I was going to say the more weird part, but I'm going to save that. I'm going to tell you exactly how Vespucci got his name on the map, literally. So what happened was he sailed 1501 to the southern tip of South America, and he discovered it, and he was like, this is different. This isn't right. This isn't India. This is a new world. Like, this is a whole new thing that we've never seen before. So he goes back, and he actually gets linked up with this dude, Martin Waldseemüller. I swear to you, that's how it's pronounced. Probably not, but that's okay. Martin Waldseemüller. He was actually charged. France was taking on this very important duty to remap the globe, because they had all of these explorers, right, that were going out and like blop, 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 just plotting these new points on the map. And they're like, and the consensus kind of at this time is that we're hitting India. Like Columbus, till the day he died, which is like 1508, 1509, Columbus was convinced that he had found the shortest passage to Asia, right? And so like we thought that so any preconceived notion that said like the world was round, like those were all in academia and in the more educated spheres of reality in Europe, that had been gone. Like we knew that the world was round by that time. Now, so that wasn't what they were discovering, right? It was like we closed the Earth, right? Like we finally made our way around, connected to the other side. When really we found another land mass before we could finish going. But Columbus didn't know that. And so Vespucci did. I don't know if he knew it or he just had strong suspicions. Like, I don't really know specifically what in his mind triggered, like if he'd been to Asia. And he's like, this doesn't map with Asian, whatever. Like, the environment, the wildlife, like this doesn't make sense. But I'm not sure exactly how he deduced the fact that it was a new world, but he knew it in his heart of hearts. And apparently he had either enough like personal influence or like sway with the right people that like when he got linked up with Martin Waldseemüller, who was charged by France to come up with the new most formalized and recognized maps of the world with all of these new travels, he went to him and told him like, hey, this isn't India, this isn't Asia, this is a whole new thing. Martin listened and he was like, based off what you're telling me and the information you're giving me, like I believe you. And so he developed the map that way, of which there's only like one left in the world. There were like 50, and I think they were all made into like inscribed into wood, and there were like 50 of them. Only one has survived, and I think the U.S. some museum paid like $10 million to get it, and so that's just another fun aside. So Vespucci, Amerigo Vespucci goes back. He tells him this stuff. Martin listens. Martin puts it on the map. Because he got this information from Vespucci, he puts his name on it. But he puts his name on it in like a Latinized way, because I think they were trying to uniformly name everything, so they were using Latin as the base. That's purely my guess. So that's why we're not Amerigo. That's why we're America, with a C instead of a G and an A instead of an O. Blah 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 blah. So all of that to say, like, how does that fit into, the perils of blazing new paths? Well, some of the key takeaways here is that even if you're smarter, and you make bigger discoveries and the impact of your discoveries embolden like humankind and our very understanding of the shape and scope of the planet, you're going to be forgotten to the likes of Christopher Columbus. And interestingly enough, you're going to go back to Spain and you're going to die of malaria. Thanks, Amerigo. We sure do appreciate your contributions to this hemisphere. Your ability to ascertain the fact that you didn't find the shortest passage to Asia. You actually were the one to figure out that you discovered the new a whole new world. Our thanks to you is that your name gets changed, put onto a map, and you're forgotten. Except for those that are like well educated. But I guarantee, that's why I really would love to see a poll on how many people know why America's named America. And like for me, I even had a false misconception. Like I thought that he had actually discovered it first, and then through whatever blah blah blah, history gets rewritten by the winners, and then the losers, and then the winners again. And so he got taken off, but he didn't discover it first. He discovered it. I can't even say it's second. It was a decade later. There's got to be more people that landed between 1492 and 1501. But yeah, man. So that's that. There's another thing you can look forward to. You trailblazing sons of guns out there. You ready? Ready for some more trailblazing adventures? Let's see. Oh, we'll do a fun quick one. So Meriwether Lewis from the Lewis and Clark adventure. So they were the ones to take the, what do? They sailed on a river from like the Missouri up north all the way to the Pacific Ocean, something like that. And did this amazing, incredible, like literally trailblazing, and they were able to come back. Like, and I think Clark got like shot in the leg in a hunting accident and stuff, but like he survived and made it back, and so that's cool. I guess that's one thing. And 50% of it, like if you're Clark and you go out and you're blazing trails, like you can expect to get shot by your own homies. Although that happens, admittedly, when even when you're not trailblazing and you're with people that don't recognize. I guess they probably didn't have like orange vests, orange hunting vests back then. But that's not even the real perilous portion of the story. Meriwether Lewis was found shot dead in this dingy inn in like the middle of nowhere in like Kentucky or something. So the contention is like Lewis either either committed suicide or was murdered. And this was 1809, and they had gotten back. It was like 1805, 1807, something like that. It was like it was only a handful of years between when they got back from their adventure and when like Lewis was shot dead, either self-inflicted or otherwise. So, more trailblazer fun ends to their stories. Even blazing your own trails does not cure you of depression and does not make friends. So, sorry, Lewis, but thank you so much because your name is slightly remembered in history books. It's definitely remembered in history books, and slightly remembered by the people who are currently reaping the amazing rewards of your daredevilish acts of trailblazing. This is a fun one. John Cabot. So we're hitting the entire exploration charter of like top to bottom in the Americas, right? So Columbus hits it kind of center mass in like Barbados. Vespucci hits like the most southern tip, and John Cabot hits like super far north. And this is the best part. I'm not even gonna go full deep into this because we're like beating up this area of history too much. But John Cabot sailed for Britain and actually went and he laid claim for Canada. And he actually successfully made it to a Canadian area, sailed back, was like, hey, found it. I need to go back and like explore, but I know that it's there, so we can go back and I can claim this land and we can do more exploration and actually trailblaze. Because I guess at that point, this was 1498, I believe. And so at that point, it wouldn't be trailblazing to go across the ocean, right? Like we got people sailing across. 1492, Columbus did it. And so then it's like proof positive, people are going to go now. So he went proof positive, but he wanted to blaze that trail in that land. And so when he went back, homeboy disappeared forever. He just gone, never to be heard of again. So there's another fun option for you trailblazers out there. For those who are keen to not take the road more traveled, but to take the road less traveled. Well, that less traveled road is littered with dead bodies, forgotten names, and disappeared folks. And you know what the best part? The best part about Cabot? No one even knows where he landed. There's like a fraught debate that's all, what was it? Like, he might have landed in Nova Scotia or Cape Breton or Breton. I don't know how to spell this. Maine, even. Labrador or Newfoundland. And I think y'all know where I stand on this. Obviously, Mr. Cabot landed in Newfoundland because Newfoundland's the best spot. Because I got two of them upstairs. He definitely landed in Mooseville, son. But yeah, so there's another sweet option for trailblazers out there, man. Like I said, you can get yourself shot in a dingy inn. You can get forgotten. You can get 50% killed in a nice, really lovely winter. You could just disappear with having your discoveries. No one even really knows. We just know you did something. You landed somewhere north-ish. Proud of you, bro. Great work. So we're going to shift. When I was doing the research and I was kind of pulling these stories together, I acknowledged that, my bias, my inclination was to go back to, and especially here is really easy, kind of the things that come up for like expeditions that have gone wrong and things like that, or just interesting expeditions, and trying to do the further research to see what actually happened to the expeditioner. It pulled a lot back to there because that was like the age of discovery. But I wanted to pull things that were more recent and more relevant, because the more recent that we get to our time, the more context it gives, and the more reality, kind of the more meat on the bones there is there. And there's an interesting thing that happens, because even as I was like kind of writing these stories, writing the summaries out, and like kind of putting my thoughts around them, it changed for me too. Because if you notice, like when talking about a lot of these kind of tragedies that occurred with these expeditioners in the past, and I'm kind of laughing and cracking jokes and stuff, and it's kind of funny to me, and I'm able to do that because there's a disconnect. There's a time disconnect, and there's like what was going on at the time is so different than what's going on now. So like our ability to emotionally connect with that is not as great as when we get a little bit more contemporary. So with these ones, I got like a bit more somber with it, and I've tried to kind of challenge that in of myself, and I had a hard time doing it. And I thought that maybe rather than challenging the seriousness or the more respect that I was like naturally inclined to give to these, maybe I should just do that. We can at times feel inclined to push against our kind of base instinct, our base reactions to things. And I think it's good to question them. I think it's just also important to respect them. Questioning isn't the same as disregarding and blowing off. And that's exactly what I tried to do. Is I just tried to figure out kind of why, and I think it was a time thing. I think there's a disassociation because of the gap of our pure existence. It's easier for me to emotionally disassociate with them because, like I said, the time was so different. I already explained. So these ones, the two that I looked at, they were both NASA, right? Because we're thinking about like where are we exploring now? Like, yeah, deep into the oceans. What kind of there's some disasters that occurred there with some submarines, but in the more recent times, it's kind of been, it's like space exploration, right? It's big dangerous things. Like we had these big boats that were sailing across the ocean, and we weren't really sure. Like we're so used to kind of hugging shorelines and following the known areas and just kind of circling around. Like, okay, we'll go around there. We'll fight each other in the water. We'll fish. We'll trade. We'll do all this stuff. But we're gonna do it kind of guiding along the coast. We're not going to like sail out to the middle and just keep going to the places that we can't see until whatever happens. And so we're doing that now with rockets going instead of across, up and out. And so, there was two tragedies that I saw that I wanted to at least reference. So the Apollo 1 tragedy was on 27th January 1967, where tragedy struck on a launch pad at Cape Kennedy during a pre-flight test for Apollo 204. The mission was to be the first crewed flight of Apollo and was scheduled to launch February 21st, 1967. Astronauts Virgil Grissom, Edward White, and Roger Chaffee lost their lives when fire swept through the command module. And then the Challenger tragedy in the 28th of January 1986 kills 7, including a teacher because of an O-ring failure. From when I read it, my understanding was I think it was cold outside, and so but like pretty cold, like it was negative something degrees, and that caused failures in the O-rings, and there were people that were saying, oh, we can't do this, the O-rings, it's bad, it's I don't know if they were specifically saying the O-rings that failed were going to fail, but they were saying that, like, it's not safe to operate under these conditions, and they operated anyway. And then 7 people died, including that school teacher. And the school teacher was, like, supposed to go out there and like, basically kind of motivate students, like, be there and, like, represent, like, teachers and students, like, look at these experiments that I'm able to do in space. And I'm just like, I'm just a school teacher. And so, and then she ended up dying with the entire crew. And that's just, it's another thing that, when you veer off the beaten path, there are risks. There's a reason that the beaten path is safer, and it's more people have traveled it. We've done it. People have already blazed that trail and have made it safer to operate in those ventures. So when we're on that trail and we veer off of it, like, we're going into uncharted territory, we don't know what's out there, and sometimes it's what's out there that kills us. Sometimes it's something that we do, we get ourselves killed. Sometimes our method to get out there is what kills us. It's may as well be an infinite number of things that can be the ultimate demise of you in blazing the new trail. I love this expression where it's like, I don't want to be the trailblazer, I want to be the settler. The trailblazer is the one that finds the new world and turns around with a back full of arrows, and the settler is the one that comes in afterwards and starts a new civilization and changes the world. Like, this, the trailblazer will get written down in the books by the people by the settlers that survive. And it's not to say that you can't be out there early as a settler, there's market terms for that, early adopters, and things like that, so it's just it's interesting. So there's one more story that I wanted to talk about before I kind of moved on to, like, my conclusion and closing thoughts. And it's this, what was it, Terra Nova, I think, is kind of the Terra Nova expedition. So it's really interesting because there were, this one was particularly interesting, and I felt like it was a really great way to kind of close this off, was that there were 2 expeditions that were going to the Arctic, and they were happening simultaneously. And now this is earlier, this is probably late 1800s, I want to say. But essentially what happened was there were 2 different explorers and 2 different teams, and the thought process behind the explorers was very different from one another. One explorer said, I'm on a mission. My mission is to get to the Arctic and to map this stuff out and to travel where like no one's traveled before. And the other person's mission was stated mission was, I want to go on an adventure. I want to be an adventure. The first guy said, if I'm on an adventure, it means something's gone wrong, right? I'm on a dedicated, focused mission, and I'm going to plan things out meticulously so that way we have properly rationed food. Our base camps and our stationary camps are set up strategically. They're planned out. I'm following this logical plan that makes sense to ensure that we have coverage and we have an ability to fall back or flex forward, as weather shifts and as we're trying to survive and complete our mission. And the other guy was like, yeah, man, let's go get it. Let's tear this thing up. And so, I bet you can figure out what happened. So this is not a surprise story. right? This is exactly what you think would happen is exactly what happened. The dude that meticulously planned out the mission and saw it as a mission and not as some playtime adventure is the one that successfully completed the mission, came back and succeeded in his mission. Now, I paused and hesitated there because I was going to say was a success, but it really depends on what you mean by success. Like if he wanted his mission and his people to be talked about and remembered, then he failed. And he failed in that because he was so meticulous and he was so attention to detail and he was mission focused, and he was competing. The attention that he was competing with was with this outlandish guy whose story was so much more interesting in its disastrous nature of existence. So he's like this very carefully boring story of proper execution competed with the story of like brute force going out, like battling the wilderness and getting your freaking butt thrown around and tossed and everybody dying as a result. That story ended up getting all of the news coverage. I ended up getting all the stuff written about it, all the people talking about it. It was all about that group when these two groups went at the same time and one team was extremely successful and the other team failed miserably. So again, look at your two trailblazing opportunities there. You have one where it's like, yes, you're going to go, you're going to accomplish the mission, you're going to get it, you're going to win, you're going to figure this stuff out, and you're going to be successful, and you're going to bring everybody home, and no one's going to really know about it. No one's going to talk about it. No one's going to write about it. But the guy next to you that did it and screwed it all up, he's going to get written about. He's going to get talked about. And if you're that guy, you're going to get written about and you're going to get talked about, but you're going to be dead. Right? You want to be a trailblazer? Again, all of this came to me, this idea came to me when we were walking the dog. We were out for the walk and I found that path that was much more well traveled. And here's the thing. This is how it works. Like, no matter what you do, if you think you're a trailblazer, like, understanding the roads more traveled and the paths paved is extremely important. And there's a bit of gratitude that kind of comes with it too. You know, you're not going to trailblaze anything without you walking steadily in the paths that are well blazed and well paved before you. Columbus didn't create the boat and the ship that crossed the sea, right? Like, somebody had to create that. Like, all of this stuff was done. And so he grew up, whatever. I don't know if he grew up. I'm assuming he grew up sailing, on boats, knowing ships, understanding how to sail, understanding how to run a crew, All of that had been done thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of times by people all over, and so he walked steadily in those well-paved paths. Well-traveled paths, and then he veered off and did his thing. Same thing with Vespucci. And the thing is, so for every one of these stories, you can find another one where it's crazy successful and awesome. And honestly, like, the Vespucci thing is, it sucks that he doesn't get the acknowledgement. Like, he doesn't have a day. It's so crazy that Columbus has a day and Vespucci doesn't, and Amerigo doesn't have a day. Especially, like, everyone going a little tidbit random, venting or ranting about Columbus Day. So everyone freaks out, like, now, Columbus he had slaves and he raped women and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, man, that's bad. And I would never, like, that's cool. That's fine. But if we were to remove everyone from history who also did bad things, like, we would never write about history. We never know about it. Like, so I look at, I think of this kind of like the Michael Jackson debate, if the things that are said about him where he touched kids and everything was true, which it seems like it was, does that make his music really awful to listen to? Does it make the experiences that you had with his music and around his music less valid, less okay? Does it make it bad that you enjoy the stuff that he created? No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think that it's bad if you try to feel bad about enjoying his music. I think it's bad if you feel bad about being an American because of slaveholders of the past. You know, I love Frederick Douglass. He said something to the effect of, you know, slavery is bad. Right, he was a slave. He got out of slave. Slavery is awful. It's the worst thing you can do to another human being. And what America is a failure. At that time, was a failure to live up to the initial promise made in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And so we just have to work towards our way to living up to it. And that's the way that I really like to see it is, you know, we aspire, we're an aspirational country. We aspire to get better. We aspire to treat people better and to continue to work in a direction that incorporates, you know, our people in a way that makes everyone feel like we're a part of something. And that's what I feel like is really missing right now is we don't feel like we're a part of something. We're becoming with technology like this, we're creating networks that cross and span typical national boundaries and creating new networks with people all over the world. A huge base of my listeners come from overseas. And I appreciate all of you guys. I appreciate you dealing with like my American rhetoric when I put it out. That's what you get with me, you know, and that's not a bad thing. But it's when it comes to establishing a country that and continuing to move a country in a direction that's positive and beneficial and is conducive to creating a place for me to be able to launch a business where I'm able to contact, you know, and operate globally. You know, it's important to have a connection there too. Like my only identity doesn't need to be I'm an American. My only identity doesn't need to be I'm a veteran. You know, there are layers, right? And it's important to be able to have those different things and to be able to pursue and get better at them. And it's actually I'll talk more about it later, but it goes into everything that I'm talking about, everything that I'm prioritizing and talking about now, all goes back to this book idea I'm having for the book that I'm writing. And so I'm really excited about that. It's a really good time. But I really wanted to make sure that I paid homage and that we're paying homage to the paths and trails that are already blazed and already paved. It's very important to acknowledge how I'm able to use this camera and streaming technology, my computer and everything set up because other people have done it before me and because people created these things. And so I'm walking those paved things and I'm trying to establish something a little bit new, a little bit different. You know, I'm not doing anything groundbreaking or crazy, you know, but I want to do something a little bit different, something that's got my flavor in it. And some people really, really, really want to go hard left. And like, let's be clear, I have no problem with that. My podcast started off as burn your boats. It was like, stop doing the stuff where you're like enslaved by your own mind and your own limitations and set yourself free from those and move forward in a way in your own way. Now, moving forward in your own way, you're able to use and leverage those paths that other people have done. You know, trying to recreate the wheel is silly if the wheel already exists. Like, look at the design. But then I'm not discrediting, I'm not discounting. People must be out there blazing trails. They must be. That's how we found America. That's how we got to the moon. That's how we're gonna get to Mars. You know, it's how we're sending all this stuff. I was watching a documentary with my stepdaughter. It was like, we're not done yet, but it's all about like sending this satellite to the sun. They found a way to build a satellite and send it to the freaking sun. Like, that's really hot. I don't know how we can do that. I don't know how you could create something on Earth with earthly materials that you could send and get closer to the sun, without it just destroying it. It's terribly interesting. So the trailblazers have got to be there, and those trailblazers are working and leveraging off paths that have already been paved, and it's important for us to not forget about those. So that's really what I'm getting at here, is don't forget about them. Love them. Take them. Be like excited about the fact that you get to go on a path that's already been blazed. Because that's the feeling I had when I was walking down there with the dogs, and I looked to my right and I saw that route that was just cleared out. I was like, oh, thank God. This is so much easier. There's literally no reason for me to go try to blaze a trail over on that side of the creek when there's one right here. And so figure out what's right for you. Again, everything we talk about on the show is there's a tightrope, right? Every topic that I bring up, I always see it as like, you're on this line, you got your pole, and you're trying to balance between two things. So this is finding that balance between walking on the road well traveled and trailblazing, right? That's all I'm saying. We don't get so bent around the axle with you have to go out there and trailblaze. And I'm not saying that you're gonna die of malaria and be forgotten to history, although it's a possibility. Obviously, it's happened. It means it could happen again. Don't let it happen to you. With that said, if you enjoyed this week's show, thank you. I'm so happy that you guys come and you stay here and you listen and spend time with me. And like I said, every week we're growing, man. We've exceeded 100 subscribers. We're getting thousands of views, and it's really, really, really fun. It's really exciting. If you are enjoying it, if you did like this episode, all I ask you to do is, we can literally double our viewership, and we can reach that many more people if you just share it to one person. You just find one person, just send that message like, hey man, this is a pretty interesting episode. Talked about some history and stuff, and a little bit of dangers of a new perspective of looking at venturing out on your own or trying to blaze new trails and being a trailblazer, and why maybe that's not always a good thing. It was kind of funny. It's kind of interesting. It was a little bit different. Check it out. And send that one. Just send the link to a friend. And if they want to listen, they'll listen, and if you got a couple friends, send it to them. But I appreciate that you guys are here, and like I said, if you're getting pleasure and if you're getting value, subscribe, and most importantly, come back again next week, because it's great to hang out, and I love it. So thank you guys. Thank you so much for coming here. I really appreciate what you're doing. I can't do what I'm doing without you guys on the other side. So have a great day, have an amazing weekend, and I will see you here again next week for another episode on the Matt Lestali Show.